been able to see my picture when I'm doing this, but for some reason, even when I click view gallery, it's only showing you, not show self view. There it goes. Now I've got it. Anyway, so thank you for this opportunity. You guys have been through so much. I mean, the whole world knows it.
Mm.
And you've been lied to for so long that it's very difficult to tell what the truth is. And obviously, we know that the truth is very important, it's paramount. Truth is everything. And I want to give you a finally bring some truth into your life, and maybe it can help console you going through all these difficult times. Um, we've got all these religions. We've got Christianity, we have Islam, we have Judaism. We have all these religions and so many different branches of Christianity. How do you know who's got the truth? How are we supposed to know what's really true in this world? I mean, especially when we've been lied to for so long. And the answer is the ones who have the explanation for the Bible, from the source, are the ones who have the truth. And I think one of the best ways to demonstrate that is from the story of King David and his great grandmother, Ruth. Now, if you go onto YouTube, excuse me, if you go onto YouTube or Sermon Audio and you type in the Book of Ruth, you'll literally find thousands and thousands and thousands of lectures, sermons on the Book of Ruth and on King David. But because they're not Jewish and they don't have the source from the Jews, they don't know what they're talking about. With all due respect, they have no clue what they're talking about. And I think we can best demonstrate that by showing how we understand King David and the Book of Ruth. Now, if you just casually read the book, it's a short book, 4 small chapters. They'll tell you it's a story of romance. They'll tell you it's a love story. It's a story about redemption and about kindness, and how even in hard times, God is with these people. But that is so understated for what the book is really all about. Now, if you look at the book, you'll see some main characters. You'll see Ruth, of course, and her mother-in-law, Naomi, Naomi's husband, Elimelech, and their 2 sons, Machlon and Kilion. And if I ask the average person, who is the main character in the Book of Ruth? I'd get quite a few people saying Ruth is the main character, or Boaz is the main character, or Naomi, or who knows what they'll say. But they all would be wrong. And when I tell them the main character of the Book of Ruth, they'll be blown away. Like, who's he? What does he have to do with this story? Or if they do recognize he's an important figure in the story, they'll say, but he's not the main character. Have you ever read the Book of Ruth, Rex?
I have read the Book of Ruth a couple of times.
I heard you read the Book of Ruth, but that last part I didn't hear.
A couple times.
Oh, okay. So the whole point of the Book of Ruth, unless you have it from the Jews, you don't know what the whole point of it is. So if you really want to understand the point, you would look at Matthew chapter 1 and look at the genealogy of Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at Matthew 1, let me pull it up here. I don't know if you have it handy or not.
Got it open.
I'm sorry?
I've got it open.
Okay, so if you look at, let me look here. If you look at verse 4, Ram was the father of Amminadab, and Amminadab was the father of Nachshon, and Nachshon the father of Solomon. Now, let me pull this other thing up. A second. What do I want to do there? I want to pull something up for you. Give me a second to pull it up. Why is my... I'm just looking for a chart to show you. Looking for... Oh, okay. No, that's not what I'm looking for. Okay, I guess I do have to go back to... I wish I had it in English. I'm trying to see if I can find it in English. I apologize for the delay.
No problem.
So I'm going to have to use this one that's not in English, but how do I share this? Let me share my screen with you. Share screen, where is that?
Usually a green button at the bottom of the index buttons.
Oh, I see it. Sharing is not turned on. And I said send request, so I send you a request.
Go ahead.
Okay, share. Okay. I find it. Here we go. Okay. So anyway, what were we talking about? I'm trying to refresh my memory. Oh,
Verse 4, and we hadn't.
oh, right. Not shown. Right. So if you look at this chart, can you see where my mouse is pointing?
I can.
Okay. So at the top, just to go back, at the very top, you have Yehuda. I'm pointing to it here.
Okay.
Yehuda. Yehuda had Tamar, was married to Tamar, right? And they had twins, Peretz and Zerach. Peretz is the kingly line. And if you look at verse, let me go back to that. Where is Peretz? Peretz is in verse 3. Judah or Yehuda was the father of Peretz and Zerah.
Okay.
By Tamar. I'm still in verse 3 of 1. Peretz was the father of Hezron. And so even though Tamar had twins, the kingly line goes through only one of those twins, Peretz.
Mm-hmm.
Now we know from Genesis 49 that the kingly line must go through Yehuda. The scepter shall not depart from Judah, until Shiloh comes, nor a lawgiver from between his feet.
Okay.
So, what's a lawgiver between his feet? What's between the feet of a man? It's his reproductive organ. So, the king only comes from Judah's or Yehuda's reproductive organ. In other words, it's a biological descendant.
Okay.
And we see here in Matthew chapter 1, starting with Abraham, this is a paternal genealogy, meaning it's only the male genealogy. They did give a few of the mothers' names listed here, but nevertheless, it remains a paternal genealogy from father to son, father to son. Okay, so now back to my screen. This meeting is I'm trying to, okay. I'm trying to bring my screen back up. How do I?
Stop sharing.
No, I want to share it. I don't see it on my screen. I don't know how to make it full screen. There, that's a little better. Well, I still want it bigger.
Yeah, my full screen is up in the upper right.
Okay.
You have the three symbols in the very top line.
Right.
And then the one next between the X and the dash is a full screen.
Okay. Anyway, I could see it now. That's the bottom line. Anyway, so we have parrots here. You see that highlighted?
Okay.
And then underneath that, we have Hezron. And under Hezron, we have Ram. And then under that, we have Aminadab.
Mm-hmm.
And under Aminadab, the son of Aminadab is Nachshon. That's here. We see that from Matthew chapter 1.
Mm-hmm.
At this point, when Nachshon has four sons, starting, I'll go from the left to the right. The first one is the father of Naomi. We don't know his name. We just know he's Naomi's father. Okay. The next one over to the right is Salmon. That's the one listed in Matthew chapter 1.
Mm-hmm.
Then the next one over is Tov. He's basically an unnamed man. They're calling him Tov, but he's not given a name in the Book of Ruth. In the Book of Ruth, he's just called the Redeemer. And the last one is Elimelech. That's Naomi's husband.
Okay.
So Elimelech married his niece. Naomi is the niece of Elimelech, because Naomi is the daughter of this man over here on the left.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So it hasn't been determined yet who is going to be the next in line to be in this messianic line that would eventually bring the Mashiach. So that's where the book starts off, with Nachshon and having these four sons. And now the question is, who's going to be the next in line to bear this messianic seed and pass it on to his son? It has to be able to trace, the Messiah has to be able to trace his paternal genealogy back to Yehuda and David and Solomon. They all come from this paternal genealogy, as Matthew 1 teaches. Okay. So, like I said, Genesis 49 is clear that the Messiah must be a descendant of Judah, a paternal descendant, and he has to be a male.
Okay.
But the question now is, who is going to be the mother? Well, we have an understanding. This comes from Deuteronomy chapter 2. I think it's verse 9. I don't want to take the time. I'll look. I got it here. I can look it up pretty darn fast. It's Deuteronomy 2, chapter 2, verse 9. It says, Hashem said to me, you shall not distress Moab, and you shall not provoke war with them. So our sages say, because it's our Bible, we know why it's written this way. And only we know why it's written this way. Because God gave us the oral law when Moses was on Mount Sinai, and he explained all this to us. We have an order not to harass Moab. Well, why would we think to harass Moab? Well, because Moab helped the Midianites persecute us and helped to try to destroy us. And God gave us permission to destroy the Ammonites. But he gave us a specific command to not harass Moab. Don't start up with them. Why do we have that commandment? We would think that we would be allowed to. The only reason we're not allowed to is because specifically God commands us, don't start up with them. Why? Because God promised that there would be a female coming from Moab who would eventually bring the kingly line into Israel.
Okay. And where's
so
that?
We know to bring the king into Israel, we must have two components now.
Okay, but where's that promise?
The promise for what?
You said that to bring
we don't harass Moab because the king's going to come through Moab. That's in the oral law.
Okay, but it's not written anywhere in the Old Testament.
Well, it's hinted to here in Deuteronomy chapter 2.
Well,
why do we have this command
not to
harass Moab, not to start up with them, not to go to war with them?
So you're saying that's a hint that it's because they don't want the possibility of killing the female that's going to be brought into the kingdom.
Exactly. Okay. Very good. Exactly. There's two beautiful birds. The law calls them two beautiful prados. Some call them pigeons or doves. That's going to come into this messianic line. Where do these two nations come from? Ammon and Moab. Do you know where they came from?
Oh, no. Mm-hmm.
Okay, if you look at the top, it's not on this. It's not on this chart, but it goes back to the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah.
Okay.
If you want to understand the Book of Ruth and King David, you have to understand the story of Sodom and Gomorrah. What happened was, before the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, Abraham had a nephew whose name was Lot. He was Sarah's brother. Abraham also married his niece. And Abraham's brother-in-law was Lot. And Lot had been captured, I think it was in chapter 17 of Genesis, by 4 kings and 5 kings. And actually what it was an ambush to try and kill Abraham. Excuse me. And Abraham risked his life to go and rescue Lot from being kidnapped. And God did a miracle and allowed Abraham to successfully free Lot, his nephew, from captivity. After he was saved from his captivity, he separated from Lot and went to go live in Sodom and Gomorrah. And that was the worst mistake of his life, to separate from his uncle of Abraham. Anyway, Abraham was told that God was going to destroy Sodom. And Abraham went to Sodom to try and he tried to convince God to find 10 righteous people in this town, that he should save the city on account of the 10 righteous. And in the end, there were not 10 righteous, and God destroyed the city. After the city was destroyed, Abraham rescued Lot from the destruction of the city also. And Lot came out with his 2 daughters. And then the 2 daughters were in the cave with their father. Do you remember that story?
I do.
Now, do you know the reason why the Lot's daughters were with their father that night and the next night?
Well, because their mother was turned to a pillar of salt.
Right. And so, how does that answer the question? Why were they with their father physically?
Well, are you talking about the sexual component?
Yes, right, correct.
Bring a son?
Right. Because from their perspective, there was no males left on earth.
Right.
If they wanted to keep the world going, if they wanted to save the world, they have to save mankind.
Mm-hmm.
And the way they saw it, according to their calculation, their father was old, and it's now or never if we're going to save the world.
Mm-hmm.
So the first daughter was with her father that night, and she brought Moab into the world. The name Moab means from my father. And the second daughter was with her father the next night. They got him so drunk he didn't know what was going on. And the second daughter brought the Ammonites into the world. These two boys, Moab and Ammon, would eventually bring daughters into the world. And those daughters or granddaughters would eventually marry into this paternal line of Yehuda. Ruth would marry Boaz, and a woman by the name of Naaman would be King Solomon's wife, who would bring the next king after King Solomon. So that whole episode with Lot and his daughters was all about bringing the Messiah into the world. Now, they brought Ruth brought, who's from Moab, brought Obed into the world. Obed brought Jesse or Ishai into the world, and Yishai or Jesse brought David into the world. So one of those daughters, namely from that union of Lot and his daughters, one of those descendants, a female, married into this messianic line. And also a daughter of this other boy, Ammon, married into this messianic line.
Okay.
Okay, so who is Ruth? Ruth comes from Lot and his daughters. Who is Boaz? Boaz is right here underneath Solomon. If you look at Ruth chapter 1, Solomon was the father of Boaz. Remember that from Matthew chapter 1? So Boaz comes from Yehuda and Tamar. Do you remember the story of Yehuda and Tamar? From Genesis 38.
Okay.
That she was a very righteous woman. She knew that great men were going to come from this family. And she desperately wanted to have a part in bringing this great child into the world. And Yehuda had 3 sons. Is this first one way over here on the right. He did a certain sin and died, and was not able to give Tamar children. The next there, Onan, also did a certain sin, and he also died. There left one son left, Solomon. Mm-hmm. He was supposed to marry Tamar, but Yehuda was afraid to give his last son to Tamar, fearing that Tamar was the one who killed her sons, that this was a woman who kills her husbands. Okay, rings a bell, right? Yeah. But she wasn't killing her husbands. It was their own sin that brought about their death. And she desperately wanted to bring the kingly line into the world.
I'm not familiar with that story. Where is that?
Genesis 38.
With the two...
the twins.
Not the twins, the 2 husbands that died?
Right. And then um, Tamar had twins.
So Genesis 38.
Right.
So Judah has three sons,
Correct.
slain by the Lord. Tamar, disguised as a harlot, bears twins by Judah. Okay, got it.
Right.
Yes.
So what happens is that the when a brother dies without having any children,
Mm-hmm.
the the brother of the dead person marries his brother's widow
Right.
and brings offspring into the world for him.
Mm-hmm.
So the way it goes is the child is named after that husband that died.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So the first husband, died, and Onan was with his sister-in-law, but he also did a certain sin, and he died without giving her children.
Right.
Now she's disguising herself. She's not a harlot, God forbid. She's a very righteous woman, but she's disguising herself as a harlot to try and lure Yehuda into this relationship because she desperately wants to have children from this family. And it's actually a commandment for her to marry Yehuda and have children if he's not going to give her the third son, Shelah.
Okay.
Okay. Now, she had two husbands, and Onan, and neither one of them had given her any children.
Mm-hmm.
So the question is, the next son that's born from Yehuda and Tamar, would that son be named after the first husband, or after the second husband, Onan?
Right.
So what's the answer?
I don't know.
The answer is that's why she had twins, Peretz and Zerah,
Okay.
one for each of the husbands.
Mm-hmm. All right.
But the kingly line only comes through Peretz. Okay. So Ruth comes from Lot and his daughters, and Lot and his daughters are only with their father only to keep the world going. You can rest assured they had no licentious desire to be with us husband. They're with their father. This must have been a very degrading experience, but they only did it because they didn't feel there was any other way to keep the human race going.
Okay.
And then Boaz comes from Yehuda and Tamar. And Tamar is only trying to keep her dead husband alive, to keep his memory going on.
Mm-hmm.
So you have the story of Lot and his daughters and the story of Ruth, Yehuda, and Tamar coming together and forming a new story in the book of Ruth.
Okay.
Ruth is from Lot and his daughters, and Boaz is from Yehuda and Tamar. Okay. Now the question is, who's going to be the next one in this messianic line? Who is going to be next after Nachshon? By the way, this Nachshon down here, listed in Matthew chapter 1, was a very, very great man. He was a prince of the tribe of Yehuda. He was extremely great. And his four sons were extremely great. And if you were a betting man, you would bet that one of these four sons is going to be the next one in the line of this messianic line.
Okay.
But which of these four is it going to be? That's the big question. So we have this commandment in Deuteronomy chapter 2 to not harass Moab.
Mm-hmm.
And the great ones knew there had to be a marriage, there had to be a marital relationship between a paternal descendant of Yehuda, he must be a very righteous man, and they must unite with a convert from Moab, a
Okay,
female convert.
question here.
Sure.
In this patriarchal order, why would it not just be the oldest son of the four?
God is handpicking the one who's worthy. If we go back to David, um, Jesse had, I think it was 7 or 8 sons, and they were all extremely righteous,
Right.
very great men. The oldest one was Eliab, and Shmuel, Samuel the prophet, was sure this oldest boy, definitely he's the next one in line to carry this messianic seed.
Okay, so it could be, it doesn't necessarily have to follow the
Right,
patriarchal line.
right,
God just
right,
chooses who he wants.
right. And it has to be a paternal descendant. And all of the relationships in this line must not be from any prohibited relationship. In other words, none of these relationships can be adultery. That would be totally forbidden, cut off the line. It has to be a holy and pure line.
Well, can God not do whatever he wants? You know, you're saying
Right.
there are rules are established, but God makes exceptions whenever he wants.
Well, God doesn't make exceptions whenever he wants. He has to follow his own rules. Okay. His rules are that in this line, they have to be impeccable quality, impeccable.
Where are those rules?
Those rules are located throughout the Tanakh. Now, you know what I mean when I say the Tanakh?
No.
The Old Testament. The Tanakh. The T stands for Torah. The
Okay.
Nun stands for Navi, the prophets, and the writings. Okay, so what most people call the Old Testament is the Tanakh.
Okay.
It's in the Tanakh, and it's in the oral law.
Okay.
So the question is, what do we do? How do we keep this line going? Nachshon and and his sons, they all know that there's this female convert from Moab, who's going to join the Jewish people, and she's going to be one of the mothers who's going to be the matriarch of the Davidic dynasty. Now,
Okay.
if you look carefully at the first verse of Ruth chapter 1, it definitely helps if you look at it in Hebrew. Let me try to pull that up. It says sharing has, okay, stop share. Now I'm going to try another one. Second. Now, I pulled this up. Oh, here, this is better. Let me share this screen with you now. Let's see how I do. Share. Okay, so Ruth chapter 1, that's where this there is. If you look at it in the Hebrew, I'm going to move this out of the way. And it came to pass in the days when the judges judged that there was a famine in the land, and a certain man of Bethlehem, Judah, went to sojourn in the field of Moab, he and his wife and his 2 sons. This book of Ruth was written by Samuel the prophet. Samuel the prophet coronated both King Saul and King David. And the whole point of the book of Ruth, who's the main character in the book of Ruth? If you go to chapter 4, the very last word can you see what I highlighted at the bottom of the screen?
Mm-hmm.
That's David.
Okay.
The whole point of the book of Ruth is to bring David into the world. That's the whole point. So back in verse 1, this verse is packed with meaning, a lot of hidden meaning that only the Jews understand because we have the oral law from Mount Sinai. First of all, you see these two words,
Mhm.
Shoftim. You see how these three letters are repeated in the second word. The shin, the pei, and the tes. Do you see those three letters and then the three letters again in the next word?
Mhm.
It's the same word repeated twice. And they say in the days when the judges judged. It doesn't say that. What it literally says in the time when the judges were judged.
Okay.
So what does it mean the judges were judged? Well, our oral law teaches. It means that the judges were being judged. Or another way to understand it, I don't know if you know any Yiddish at all,
Yeah.
but it means it was a time of great chutzpah. Have you ever heard of chutzpah?
Mhm.
Okay, for Lori to leave and go to the drugstore and take J-Day to school while her husband was bleeding to death or already dead. Chutzpah. Okay. So to say this phrase, shoftim the shoftim, it's code word to say it was a time of great chutzpah. And chutzpah is a time for geula, a time for redemption. This told Elimelech, now was the time to go and find this female convert. A female convert is called a Gioris. A male is called a Ger, and a female is called a Gioris. And he was leaving Israel specifically to find this holy woman who was going to marry into his line and bring about the messianic redemption. And then it has this all important phrase, Vayelik Ish. I can't spend a whole lot of time, but I'll just briefly tell you this phrase, Vayelik Ish, is packed with meaning. What it literally means is a man went. Vayelik is went, and Ish is a man. It just means a man went. That same phrase, if you look at that, I want to try to open it into a different screen to show you. Right here. Can you see the screen I'm showing now?
Mhm.
You see what I highlighted? Vayelik Ish.
Mhm.
Same. Now go back to this other screen. You can see the other screen.
Okay.
Both Ruth, you see Ruth and you see Exodus chapter 2.
Right.
Okay. Same words. Vayelik Ish. Here translated, a man went from the house of Levi. Okay. This whole story in Exodus chapter 2 is all about the birth of Moses, the
Okay.
first redeemer. This phrase in Ruth, Vayelik Ish, is all about the second redeemer, David.
Okay.
So it's packed with meaning. The whole point was it says at the beginning right here, this phrase, Rav Ba'aretz. There was a famine in the land. What was the point of this famine? The whole point of this famine was to bring this Gioris and to bring David. Because this woman who was going to marry into the tribal line of Yehuda, was going to bring the messianic redemption. And it's tied to this famine. The whole point of this famine is to bring Elimelech from Israel to Moab to find this righteous woman. And you see in verse 1, it says, and his two sons. That's the only reason they went, because they had two sons that were capable of being selected to be the wife of Ruth. So Elimelech's father was Nachshon. Remember, Nachshon had 4 boys. One of his boys was Elimelech. Now, what was Nachshon famous for? If you go onto Google and you type in Nachshon, I'm just going to do it just for kicks to see what happens. I'm just going to go to Google and say Nachshon. Show Ben Aminadab. I'll click on that. It automatically did you see that on my screen?
Mhm.
Not shown Ben Aminadab, not shown the son of Aminadab. I'm just trying to see what it says. Nachshon was a tribal leader of the Judites during the wilderness wanderings of the Book of Numbers, and King David spelled Nachshon. Okay, I'm going to go to. If you look, can you see this picture here? See these pictures here?
Yep.
That's a picture of. What does that look like?
I don't know.
Do you see the sun
Mhm.
and see the water
Yep.
and the dry land?
Okay.
That's the crossing of the Red Sea.
Oh, okay.
Why does that picture come up with Nachshon ben Aminadab? The answer is because Nachshon was the one who went into the water first, and the water didn't actually split until it got up to his nose.
Okay.
Nachshon is known as being very brave and trusting God. God said to go forward, I'm going forward. And it wasn't until Nachshon jumped into the water that it split. Now, Elimelech is his son, is Nachshon's son. We saw that from, well, we don't see that from Matthew chapter 1 because Elimelech is not in the line because he died. But Nachshon's one of Nachshon's other sons, Solomon, is listed in Matthew chapter 1. But another brother was Elimelech.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the point. Who was Nachshon? Nachshon was the one who went where no one else would go to bring the redemption. He went into the water when everyone else was afraid. Now his son, Elimelech, is leaving Israel and going to this cesspool of Moab specifically to bring the redemption. He's being a very courageous man. And they went specifically to find this Gioris and bring her back. And she was an extremely righteous woman. But his two sons, for whatever reason, God disqualified them. And now it's been given over to Boaz and his descendants.
Okay.
So what we're seeing here is that if you really want to know what's really going on in the Torah, in the Tanakh, you have to go to the Jews. It's a well-kept secret, but if people would take the time to learn and ask these questions, then they could get the answers. But in Judaism, we don't believe in proselytizing and trying to convince people to join our religion. Our point is just to be a light unto the nations. And you guys have been through so much with what you've been with your family. I felt like you guys deserve to know some truth. You've had enough lies in your life that maybe it's time to get a little taste of the truth. And I can't even begin to tell the story of David and Bathsheba until we first understand the story of Ruth. And the only way we know that Ruth is allowed to join, because we have another contradictory verse. Let me show it to you. Go back, see if I can do this. It is Deuteronomy 23. If you look here at verse 4, an Ammonite or a Moabite shall not enter into the assembly of the Lord, even to the 10th generation, shall none of them enter into the assembly of the Lord forever, because they met you not with bread and water in the way when you came forth out of Egypt. So in order to understand the book of Ruth and Ruth herself, you have to understand what happened with Lot. Abraham risked his life to save Lot from the 3 kings and the 5 kings. As a result of Abraham rescuing Lot, Moab was born. Because Abraham risked his life to save Lot, the nation of Moab was brought into the world. Therefore, the nation of Moab, the Moabites, owed a debt of gratitude to the Jewish people, to Abraham and his descendants, because if it wouldn't have been for our ancestor, their ancestor would never have been born. Mm-hmm. And now we're coming out of Egypt, and we really don't need bread and water. We had the manna fall from the sky, and we had the well of Miriam. But from a human perspective, we wanted them to give them an opportunity to show kindness and gratefulness for what our grandfather had done for their grandfather. So we asked them for their bread and water, even though we didn't need it. We only asked them for their benefit. Mm-hmm. We wanted to help them. So we asked for their bread and water, and we told them we would even pay for it. And they said, no way. Not only we're not going to sell you our bread and water, we're going to attack you instead. And God was saying, you can't say thank you? Their grandfather risked his life to save your grandfather, and you can't say thank you? You can't even say thank you? Bread and water. We had the well of Miriam. We only asked it for your benefit, to give you a benefit. And God says, because you can't say thank you, we don't want you marrying into our Jewish people. When it says shall not enter the congregation of the Lord, that's code for it, means they can't marry into the Jewish people. They're allowed to convert to Judaism, but they can't marry somebody born Jewish. Okay? So the question is, we have a verse in the Torah itself, Deuteronomy chapter 23, makes it clear that no Moabite can marry into the Jewish people. So how is Ruth able to marry into the Jewish people? The answer is with this phrase right here. Because they met you not with bread and water in the way. In other words, they didn't show hospitality. They didn't show gratefulness for what our grandfather had done for their grandfather. The way they didn't show it because they didn't greet us with bread and water in the way. So how does this allow Boaz to marry Ruth, or Ruth to marry Boaz? And the answer is, our sages teach, it's in the oral law, that it's not proper modesty for a female to go out and serve strange men. It leads to promiscuity. Therefore, our sages say that the only ones who are obligated to bring us bread and water are the men, not the women. And Ruth was a female. From where do we know, where in the Torah do we know that it's not the way of a woman to show hospitality to strangers, to strange men? We know this from Genesis 18. Okay, so what happened is, after Abraham's circumcision in Genesis 18, this was just before the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah in the next chapter. In Genesis 18, God sends 3 angels to visit Abraham after his circumcision. One angel has the job of healing Abraham from the circumcision. The second angel has the job of telling Sarah the good news. She's going to have a son, Isaac. But the last son, the third angel, what was his job? His job was to destroy Sodom in the next chapter. Well, if you only have one mission and your mission is in Sodom, why are you with Abraham in chapter 18? Your job's not till the next chapter. The answer is because this angel who had to go and destroy Sodom and Gomorrah in the next chapter had a very important question to ask Abraham. What was the question? The question was Lot. When we go to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah, should we rescue Lot or should we not rescue Lot? Well, why is that a question? Well, we could see prophetically, if we rescue Lot in chapter 19, we know he's going to be with his daughters in the next chapter and bring Moab into the world. And Moab is going to bring Ruth into the world. But if Ruth cannot be married to Boaz, why should we bother to save Lot? We need to know, should we save Lot? What does it depend on? It depends. Does that verse in Deuteronomy 23 apply to men and women equally from Moab? Or does it only apply to the men, and the women are allowed to marry into the congregation of the Lord? Well, how do we know that? Well, we go to Abraham, the leader of the religion, and very subtly, they come to Abraham and they ask them the all-important question in verse 9. Where is Sarah, your wife? Think about it. 3 strange men come out of nowhere, and the first question they ask is, where's your wife? You know, stuck them in the nose. It's none of your business. Sarah's already been kidnapped twice by this time. You know, I've had it up to here with people asking about my wife. There's the door. Have a nice day, gentlemen. But Abraham's not offended. Oh, Sarah? Oh, she's in the tent. I'm here to tell you this question, where is Sarah, your wife, is one of the most important questions that's ever been asked in all of human history. And I'm not overstating it. If anything, I'm understating it. So why is the angel there, and why are they asking about his wife? Because they had a Shiloh. What's the Shiloh? Should we save Lot or should we not save Lot? Is Ruth going to be permitted? Can Ruth marry into the Jewish people, or is she not allowed? Well, it all depends. Is it the way of a woman to serve strangers or not? We're strangers, Abraham. We're men. We're angels disguised as men. And we're now showing up at your house. You're the man. You brought us bread and water. But we need to know the all-important question. Where is your wife? Now, if we understand the question, for sure Abraham's understood the question. They're asking, is Ruth going to be allowed? What's the way of a woman? Is a woman expected to go out and greet strangers, or is it not considered modest? So they come to Abraham and said, where's your wife?
Okay, hold on, Israel. I need to take a quick bathroom break. I'll be right back.
Sure.
Okay, I'm back.
No problem. So the bottom line is Abraham's asking this question, answering this question. When he said, behold, she's in the tent, what he was saying was, go rescue Lot. Ruth is legitimate and David is legitimate. You can't punish Ruth for not coming out with bread and water since Sarah didn't come out with bread and water. Go save Lot. When he said, behold, she's in the tent. Mm-hmm. It's all written in code to keep it secret. This is a private, personal love letter between Hashem and his people.
Why does it need to be secret? For us. Why do we need to?
To make sure that you get the truth from the source. See, the whole world has the Bible, quote unquote, but they make it say whatever they want. But the Bible means what the Jewish people say it means, because God gave it directly to us. And it's incumbent upon the non-Jews to see the contradictions and ask the Jews for answers. For instance, David is one of the most beloved men in all of the Bible. He's the king of Israel. And The Bible says hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of praises of King David, how great he was. Yet we have this isolated story off in the corner about David with Bathsheba and seeing a woman taking a bath and killing her husband and taking his wife for his own. How does that jive with the rest of Scripture? It's written in that way to force people to go to the Jews and ask, how do you explain this? The non-Jewish world has no way to explain it. They just say, oh, he sinned and God forgave him. But that's not the way it works in Judaism. In order to bring the Messianic line, David and Bathsheba were the parents of King Solomon. In order to bring a holy man like King Solomon, it must be a permitted relationship. And our oral law teaches, whoever thinks that David committed adultery and murder is simply mistaken. They don't know the facts of the case. So it's kept hidden so that we have free will. If it was obvious to the whole world what the true religion was and what the false religions were, there would be no cause to expect reward for choosing what's right and not doing what's wrong. God gave us a job in this world, and our job in this world is to find him and to serve him. And God gave us a brain to ask questions and to think and look for the answers. And that's what we have. And the Jewish people are there, and we're able and open to answering people's questions, but only honest, sincere questions, not anti-Semitism or attacks against us. But I really felt like if anybody deserved it, it's you and your family to know some of these things. And I know this may be hard to hear, but sometimes the truth is harder to hear than a lie.
This is not hard for me to hear at all. I so much appreciate you sharing it, and I think you do it with the purest of intentions.
Right.
Hard to hear that. I just feel love from all of this.
You should. Okay, I have about 4 minutes left if you want to ask any questions.
I
and
don't.
You can always contact me. You have my phone number. You have my email address. If you want to do more sessions like this, I'm welcome to do it. If you want to publish it, you can publish it, whatever.
I'll tell you where I stand with it. In my personal belief, and I'm not talking about religion here, whether it's Christianity or Islam or Judaism, whatever. You said it very well just about 1 minute ago. You said in something to the effect of, in this life, we need to find God. Right? In my opinion, religion stands no, it doesn't. When we put religion in between, I'm not even going to say we. If I were to put religion in between me and God, I would never find him. I believe I have to find him by going directly to him the best way I can.
Let me. Okay, can you see the pictures on the screen right now?
I do.
Okay, so I only have a couple minutes. Let me just share that religion is what brought me to the truth. Because once I started practicing Judaism and doing these commandments, do you know these things on his arm and on his forehead?
Make an observation, since we only have a couple minutes left.
Right.
I was just in the middle of explaining to you how it works for me.
I apologize.
Okay. And I respect completely, and I believe completely, wholeheartely, what you're telling me and have been telling me for the last hour of why this works for you.
Right.
I think that's perfectly valid. Mm-hmm. That's why I don't discount anyone's religion unless it's obviously evil, like to kill your children and bury them in your adulterous boyfriend's backyard. I don't believe that.
Right.
Okay. but a religion, someone seeking God, however they find him, I think is wonderful. I like having my way of seeking him and finding him. And every study of religion I've done, including the last hour, greatly enhances that relationship. I don't need religion to enhance my relationship with God. I do that directly.
Okay.
I said that wrong. I don't need religion to find my relationship with God. I do that directly. Religion, every religious study I've done enhances my relationship with him. And
Okay.
the fact that you could explain Judaism to me and me just feel love through the whole explanation, through everything you explained to me, explaining why Jewish people believe what they believe is miraculous to me. It's wonderful. I've never had an explanation like that of Judaism. And I know you've had to cut out, I mean, this is hundreds of hours, that you very effectively brought down into 1 hour. I love that. I love it. And
Well, I appreciate your time, and I wanted to give back something to you and to your family.
well, you definitely have. I've loved this. I've loved this time and loved
So
the
anytime you want to get together, I'm all open.
okay.
And if this can help some of your family members, Adam, Kobe, whoever, um, and this is stuff that thank God Lori will never have access to.
Yeah, that's true. But Adam, everyone has to have it at the right time, and Adam isn't searching right now for this.
Okay. Okay.
And I don't know about Colby. We
Sure.
don't have this type of relationship with him.
Okay.
But thank you so much. I appreciate
No
it.
problem. No
Love,
problem.
love you for doing it.
Oh, you're so welcome. Please stay in touch. I'd
Okay.
love to do it again.
You too. All
Okay. Thanks again. Can you send me the recording?
right.